Hey, I hope you're doing so well today. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be taking a look at two manual espresso brewers. It seems manual espresso is getting really popular with all the different options on the market, which really excites me because I think manual espresso has a lot to offer. It's a little more affordable than their espresso machine counterparts, and they offer the ability to flow control or pressure profile, if you will. And this is exciting. And today we're going to be comparing two 58mm manual espresso brewers. 58 millimeters is something that's really desirable because it's what's the standard in a commercial setting. So a lot of the accessories and even a lot of the recipes can translate a little easier to brewers like these. So let's talk about what they are, why we're comparing them, and how we're going to compare them today. But before we do, my name's Kyle, welcome to the channel. If this is the first time that we're meeting, well, hey, thanks for clicking on this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you're doing so great. Consider subscribing if you haven't already for more coffee content like this. And if you'd all do me a huge favor, smash that like button down below. I would love to hit at least, let's say 2,000 likes on this video. That would be unreal. It really does change the algorithm and promotes this video to so many people. It just spreads specialty coffee and knowledge about brewers like these to so many people who would otherwise not see it. So do me a favor, hit that like. So today, to compare these, we're going to be brewing some coffee. We're going to talk about the workflow and usability on each of these. We're going to talk about the build quality, such an important aspect, especially when you're spending this much money on a manual brewer. We're going to talk about the taste that I experience from these. While subjective, I'll try to be objective in my answers. We'll also talk about temperature stability, which I think is a big factor in this conversation. We'll try it with both not using the electronic components and using them, and not preheating and preheating. And then at the end of this video, I'll share my opinion and my thoughts on which option will be best for you. So let's dive into this. So this right here is the Flair 58. The Flair 58 is a newer brewer to the specialty coffee home brewers market, coming out this year. I've compared it in a couple other videos that I'll leave down in the description below if you haven't yet watched those. But the Flair 58 it has a lot to offer. But what separates the Flair 58 from any brewer before it is its electronic components and the standard of using a commercial portafilter. That's right, you can use any portafilter that uses an E61 group head on the Flair 58. Pretty interesting, and we're going to talk a lot about this. Like I've already mentioned, the Flair 58 gives you the ability to flow profile, which is an option for espresso that you would really only find on machines that are thousands of dollars, if not sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. And then over here we have the Cafelat robot. The Cafelat robot isn't new, it's been around for a few years now, and it's designed and created by a man named Paul Pratt. Now, I don't know Paul personally, but I've been talking with him a lot over the past few months and just testing out this robot, and he is such an interesting man who really has a passion for espresso. The Cafelat robot also uses a 58mm portafilter, but it doesn't use a commercial one. This is a proprietary portafilter basket, and I'll explain that in just a second. It obviously comes in some different fun colors like this red here, which this one only comes in the black, and it just has a very different design. Rather than the one lever on the Flair 58, this uses two little levers that are like the robot arms. Get it? It's a robot. And the interesting thing with the robot, and talking with Paul, he says the robot does not need preheating, a common issue so often found on so many manual espresso brewers. Paul just says it's not necessary. So we're going to test that on this video and see the temperature stability as well. But first I want to say I'm going to be giving this robot away to one of my Patreon supporters. I'm so grateful for all my Patreon supporters. They've enabled me to do so many fun videos, like recently my hand grinder comparison, videos like these ones, and just so many others. I just love them. If you're a Patreon supporter watching this video, thank you so much. And if you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter and winning the Cafelat robot, I'll leave a link down in the description below. By the way, the Flair 58 comes in at $575 US, and the Cafelat robot is about $450 US. There is a Flair 58X that I recently just mentioned, and this one doesn't have any electronic components that are on the Flair 58. It's a little bit cheaper, coming in around $485. Let's brew some coffee. Okay, we got a lot to talk about and we got a lot to compare. So let's start with workflow. But first I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Skillshare. Now let me ask you a question. Have you ever wanted to expand existing passions or just deepen your learning? If so, Skillshare is the platform to be on, I'm telling you guys. There are thousands of classes for so many different topics, from videography to creativity or even coffee. For example, right now I'm taking an amazing class called Latte Art Masterclass by World of Latte Art. And this class is ridiculous. There are dozens of different designs that I'm learning from anything from how to create a swan, which is pretty typical, how to create an elephant or a pussycat, a butterfly, a bear, and my personal favorite, how to craft a sunset. So when you're on a date with bae, watching the sunset, you can be drinking, I'm not even gonna finish that sentence. What has life become? But for real guys, Skillshare is an amazing platform that you need to check out if you wanna deepen your learning. If that's you wanna grow in your knowledge, then the first 1,000 people who click the link in the top of the description, this is pretty exclusive, so pause the video, click that link, then come back to the video. They're gonna get Skillshare for 1 month for free. So go ahead and do that. Go get creative, and thank you Skillshare so much for sponsoring this video. So let's start with the Flair 58. And in my opinion, I think the Flair 58 is the manual espresso brewer for the person who doesn't want the hassle of manual espresso brewing. And let me unpack that because I know that there's a lot there. Now with the Flair 58, it's electronic. So you don't have to worry about preheating a chamber, having a chamber over steam, worrying about all those little finicky things that you've had to worry with past Flair units, even with the Pro 2 and the units before it. With this, you hit a button in the morning, you decide what kind of temperature you want, and it heats up. With that, having that commercial 58mm portafilter really is game changing, and I think opens this up to more possibilities for many different scenarios. While this is definitely designed for the home brewer, I think this could fit in a small cafe setting or a cafe with a slow espresso bar. Similar to a slow coffee bar with pour-overs and a one-on-one with a customer, this might be a great option to have for a cafe who wants to have a one-on-one with an espresso setting with a customer. That commercial regular 58mm portafilter allows easy cleaning with the ability to use knock boxes or any other accessories like the Quinspin. But ultimately, I think this is the manual espresso brewer that a lot of people have desired for a while. Something that gets you into 58mm portafilters, something that allows you to flow control, something that you don't have to preheat. It's easy, it's not finicky. Like you saw when I was brewing some coffee, all you're simply doing is adding your coffee to the portafilter, tamping, adding your water to the brew chamber. It's already preheated, so you're just pressing. And with the pressure gauge, you can see live readings of the pressure in the group head, similar to any other Flairs before it. It's a wonderful feature that allows you to get into flow control at a much lower price point than espresso machines, like I've already mentioned, that are thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. Ultimately, I really have no complaints when it comes to the workflow of the Flair 58. They've even updated the newer model of the Flair 58 so that you don't even have to remove the cap to add water. It's really genius, and I can't really say anything bad about Flair's workflow on this machine. It's pretty great. The only thing you have to be weary of is that heat up time with the electronics take 5 to 10 minutes, which is still not bad, but if you're in a rush in the morning, definitely something to be noted, because without it, your coffee's just not going to taste quite as good. So let's talk about the Cafelat robot. This is definitely more traditional in its manual espresso design. Definitely not a bad thing, but different than the Flair 58. The Cafelat robot uses a dual wall proprietary portafilter basket. This is completely unique and made by Cafelat. You won't find this on any other manual espresso brewer. And this is what Paul Pratt claims is the reason why you don't need preheating. Again, we'll talk about that later in this video. And like I already mentioned, this is just 2 arms instead of 1 lever like the Flair 58. Well, the design is definitely awesome. I love this thing. It's an art piece that I'll put on any coffee bar or even my office desk. Like it's great. Now that being said, the experience of keeping control on the flow on the Cafelat robot, while enjoyable, isn't quite as great as the Flair 58. Because of its gauge and awkward placing, you've definitely got to get under to see exactly where it's at, and it's also very small. And although I've added the mittens, an accessory from Cafelat, to get more grip on the arms, it's still not as enjoyable and as smooth of an experience as the Flair 58. Don't get me wrong though, it's very enjoyable and really satisfying. It's just not quite the experience of the Flair 58 when it comes to the flow and control of the lever. It's also got a little space underneath the body, so it's really hard to get a scale under there. You've got to have a really tiny scale, which you can definitely find on places like Amazon, but it's just not as easy as a workflow with weighing out your coffee as something like the Flair that has a big pad that you can even remove depending on how big your scale is. So how do you brew coffee with the Cafelat? Well, this is where things get really interesting and a little less traditional than the Flair. You're grinding your coffee like you always would, adding it to this portafilter basket, and then tamping it with the included tamper. You can't use any 58mm accessories for this machine, and the diameter and the slope of the portafilter just won't reach that coffee. But Cafelat does offer an upgraded tamper if you want to. Highly recommend getting this if you're going to get the robot. This is a game changer. It has some levelers to make sure that your coffee bed is perfectly flat while tamping. And then you're going to put on this coffee screen, which goes over top the coffee, similar to other manual espresso brewers. You fill this up with water, and then with the arms raised, you're going to put this in place like any other portafilter and lock this down. It's quirky. It's definitely not quite as easy as this, but it's a satisfying experience and I enjoy it. It's interesting. Okay, so let's talk about build quality. So the Flair 58 uses a full metal chassis with few plastics, some rubber pieces, and some wooden accents. Now I'm going to dock some points because I don't love the wooden accents. While I'm a huge fan of wood on coffee equipment, the quality of the wood accents on the Flair just isn't up to par with the price of this machine in my opinion. I'll still give it some points for the aesthetics. It looks absolutely beautiful. It does only come in the matte black, but it is a beautiful machine overall. And like I've mentioned in past videos, I don't love the quality of the electronics. Early on in my process of the Flair 58, I had some problems with my electronics. Now Flair was great and they addressed them right away, but it just wasn't an enjoyable experience for my first couple weeks of the Flair because of those issues. And like I mentioned already, Flair does offer the 58 in a non-electronical version called the Flair 58X. It's a little cheaper, but I think the electronic components are definitely worth that upgrade because of that thermal stability. But the Cafelat robot's build quality is superb. Now, when it comes to workflow where the Flair 58 took the up, I would say when it comes to build quality, the Cafelat robot is definitely taking the win here. Everything is metal, there are no plastic pieces, and everything just feels absolutely sturdy. Now, in talking with Paul and the way that these are built, these aren't mass produced. These are built in small batches under the care of Paul Pratt. He oversees the whole process. And in his words, he says every Cafelat robot is a small victory. I think that's pretty cool. Like I said, it's a little quirky, it's a little different than the Flair 58, but there's a lot of care that goes into each one of these units. And so there's a trade-off there. Overall, I think it's great. The only place I'd really dock some points here is its rubber base. If you move this across the table, there's a rubber ring that's underneath the Cafelat robot, and I find it sometimes slips out. But otherwise, I really don't have any issues when it comes to the quality of build on the robot. And then we come to one of the more important metrics, and that's taste. And the Flair 58 really isn't that different than any espresso machine that can flow profile. That's for a few reasons, but one of them being its basket. You can use an IMS basket or any third-party basket in this brewer. And so my espresso from the Flair 58 is very similar to my Bianca. But regardless of that, this is going to be very similar to what you'd find from an espresso machine other than it can flow profile. Especially when using those electronic components, I find the temperature stability to be very good. You're going to find a very good espresso with high clarity, great mouthfeel. On the Cafelat robot, this is where things get a little more interesting. The Cafelat robot creates a very traditional manual espresso profile. And what I mean by that is high in complexity, losing a lot of that clarity, but it's not a bad thing. Sometimes I do say that and it's a bad thing, but this time it's not. The Cafelat robot creates a great mouthfeel. It's a thick, classic, very gooey espresso, and something that I do enjoy. I think this would be great for beverages with milk, but also on their own as well. It's a completely different profile than the Flair 58 in my experience. And now for me, this is something that I absolutely love because I already have an espresso machine with flow profiling. Having a Cafelat robot on hand is nice when I want to change things up. But I can't emphasize it enough, both of the espressos from these machines is fantastic. And then we need to talk about thermal stability. And this is one of the more important metrics for this test. The Flair 58 with the electronic components on was incredibly consistent. I never had an issue with thermal stability. The components work really well, except for the issues I had early on in the unit. Since then, it's been consistent and reliable. Again, like I've said, it's very similar to espresso machines. Without those components turned on, my experience is less than ideal. You've got to preheat the Flair 58. That's the bottom line. And in talking with the people at Flair, this is how this machine is designed. It's meant to be preheated, as with most manual espresso brewers. That's why the electronics come in the machine. That's why the X wasn't released at launch, but the desire from so many people who didn't want the electronics drove them to release that X. At least that's what I've been told. And then there's the Cafelat robot. And in talking with Paul Pratt, he was very adamant to let me know that this didn't need preheating. And I was very skeptical at first. Honestly, I don't know if I believed him until I tested it. And in testing, while preheating definitely helps, it's not necessary. And I've talked to other people and results have varied, but for me, my results have varied between 2 to 3 degrees for preheating and unpreheating. And I think that's pretty incredible. Honestly, I can notice only a slight difference in the shot quality, but nothing that would really bring me to preheating my shot because it's just such a pain in the butt. The Cafelat robot is great without preheating, and consistently I could pull good shots without preheating. So to conclude, knowing all of this, which would I recommend to you? Well, this was a little harder than I thought it would be. And these are so different, yet so similar. For me, I'd probably pick the Flair 58. Because I love that workflow. I love hitting a button, it preheating, and using my accessories from my 58mm portafilters and other 58mm accessories. But the Cafelat robot's just so unique. Honestly, I'm gonna really miss this machine giving it away to one of my patrons. I might have to buy another one because I really enjoy it. Now, before you go, I'm going to be looking for which one you would pick. So let me know down in the comments below. Which one would you pick if you were me? Which one have you already bought if you have one of these? Or which one are you planning to purchase in the future? Which one catches your eye? What do you like about these two machines? I would love to hear all of these things and more down in the comments below. I'll be reading every single one of those and responding to as many as I can. Like I already mentioned, please hit that like button if you can. It really, really supports this channel. It's a free way to do so. And subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're interested in winning the Cafelat robot or becoming a patron, I'll leave a link to that down in the description below as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.